Alrighty, CNT125. Our book does not have a chapter, so to speak, on voice over IP. They mention it at different times. So we're going to do a little unit where we kind of pull all those pieces together to get an understanding, a little bit of the history of how we got where we are, a little bit about the technology, so we kind of know what we're working with in the lab room. So to start off with, let's do a little bit of phone history. If we go back to 1860s, we have an individual by the name of Elijah Gray working on what was called a telegraph. Got the patent for that in 1867. This was a huge piece of technology, communications technology. With the telegraph, you had a sending unit in one town. The receiving unit would be in like the next town down the line, 10 or 20 miles or 30 miles down the line. Telegraph lines usually ran along railroad lines. Those were some of the major routes that existed at the time. So you could actually send a message from town to town, using the sending key here and using Morse code, a series of dots and dashes. You could send letters to string together a message of, like, the train is on time, the train is running late, there was a fire in this town, that sort of thing. Here's a close-up of that telegraph key. As you click down, these contacts literally make contact, complete a circuit, and a click on the receiving end happens over here. So as I push the sending unit down on this side, an electrical circuit is completed, and electromagnet over here energizes and causes these two contacts to click. So click, 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 click. You could actually send a message across the wire. So that's our first real device to send a message across a wire, and be able to send messages almost instantaneously, as opposed to word of mouth, where somebody rides into town today and says, "Hey, did you hear about the fire in the next town yesterday or the day before?" This would be able to relay information instantaneously. Well, it wasn't long after that, 1876, Alexander Graham Bell filed a notice of invention on his untested device, the beginning of the telephone, as we would call it. So now we have somebody working on, can I actually send voice across a wire instead of just dots and dashes and clicks? Can we send voice? Now, there's an interesting conspiracy theory on Elijah Gray and Alexander Graham Bell filing patents for their, I'm using little air quotes here, telephone, first phone, on the same day, and Alexander Graham Bell got the patent versus Elijah Gray did not. There's a conspiracy theory there on who actually got it first. Just a couple days later, Alexander Graham Bell sends a voice message across a network from room to room. And so we now have the first voice being able to go across a wire. And just a handful later, a little bit of time later, with tweaks to the system, founds the Bell Telephone Company. And I'm pointing this out because as we go to today, we see AT&T, and AT&T is a derivative of the Bell Telephone Company. So we see a lot of that logo still around. Mr. Brown being nerd, over the years, different places I've taken pictures of Bell Telephone System, utility covers, if you will, in various towns, Baltimore, Sharmanstown, etc. And if you keep looking, you'll still see them out there today. But that's evidence of this was once the predominant phone provider across the country. Around the same time, Edison's working on his own device. Edison was hired by Western Union. Western Union we know as the telegraph king in those days. But Edison creates his own really good carbon powder transmitter, if you will, microphone. This is eventually the one that's going to replace the one created by Bell. So Edison's contribution to this is this Edison microphone. It's compressed carbon. If you actually take like a little jar lid and use some crushed up charcoal in there and put two wires in, that's essentially what it is. And over the top, you could stretch over the top something like a Pop-Tart wrapper, that thin foil. And as I speak at that foil, it vibrates, compresses the carbon, and those wires in there, picks up that electrical signal, and I actually have the basis of the first microphone. 1880s, a bunch of exchanges across the country. 1887, 150,000 miles of wire have been strung to 150,000 subscribers, a bunch of main offices, a bunch of branch offices. But still in those days, phones were sold in pairs. So if I wanted to call two people, I would literally have two phones, one to connect to this house, one to connect to this house. That's how it was set up at that time frame. So it doesn't take long until you get this in cities where you have so many wires going everywhere to connect places, and even this right here is kind of crazy, that's a problem. All these wires going everywhere is a problem. So they need a solution. So the solution was what was called a central office, and you'll still hear that term used, it's CO, central office. Now what they did was they would string a phone line out to a neighborhood, if you will. Think about maybe a cul-de-sac in your neighborhood. That phone line would go into that cul-de-sac, and all the houses on that cul-de-sac would attach to that phone line. So all these houses here are sharing that phone line. That's where the term party line comes from. And as I would pick up the phone, as long as a neighbor wouldn't use it, I would ring the central office and they would make me a connection to somebody. And as they would connect to somebody and ring somebody over in this neighborhood, all the phones would ring. You would pay attention to your ring pattern. Your ring pattern would be different than your neighbor's. So if you would hear, bring, 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 you would know it's yours versus bring, bring, bring might be your neighbor. So you would pick it up and answer it, but it was a shared phone line. That was an inexpensive way to get phone to everybody. And you typically had a phone that looked like so. The handle on the side you would crank. Inside there's a little generator here that actually generated electricity to ring the switchboard operator. And you had a switchboard. This was actually a picture of a switchboard from the Sledworks in Duncannon, PA. Here's the switchboard, so somebody's manning that, and they would plug into your phone line using a patch cable and say, who do you want to talk to? Oh, okay. And they would take another cable and connect to them and literally connect your two phones together so you could talk. So you didn't have the ability to dial anybody. You just rang the switchboard operator and they made connection for you. So here's some pictures of switchboards in the 1870s and the early 1900s, even into the 1960s, if you will, 50s and 60s. So you literally have people manning the switchboard. You would call them, they'd say, who do you want to talk to? And they would patch you in to that person. Well, lots of stories of switchboards over time. In small towns, your switchboard operator would be a wonderful source of information. You could literally ask them things like, hey, what time's the picnic on Sunday? What time's the town picnic on Sunday? And they would know that information, could relay that to you. But in some instances, switchboard operators could be a little bit of a busybody, and be a bit of a know-it-all. So in some cases, it got to be really annoying to deal with switchboard operators. And actually, in the late 60s, early 70s, there was a TV show called Laugh-In, which was kind of a predecessor to Saturday Night Live, if people know that one. And there was a running sketch on there, with Lily Tomlin being the switchboard operator that was kind of that know-it-all. And everybody could relate to that because you'd run into that at some point or another. And that was kind of a running sketch on the TV show with the switchboard operator. Well, in some cases, the switchboard operator could actually be a source of irritation. Legend has it that in a town, I think it was like Kansas City, there was a undertaker in town, Alman Stroger, that he had a funeral business in town. However, the switchboard operator, she had a spouse that was an undertaker. So anytime somebody would call into the switchboard operator looking for funeral services, the switchboard operator would direct services to, obviously, her spouse and not Alman Stroger. So after a while, Alman Stroger got really annoyed, and I always say human nature, you annoy somebody enough and they will figure out a way. To, in this case, get my business back. So Alman Stroger, I joked, went to his basement and started venting. And he actually came up with this Stroger switch here. This stepping relay is what it is. The stepping relay worked in this concept. From a phone, if I dial a number, number 4, those pulses of electricity coming into this would click 4 times. So instead of a person making my connection for me, I could dial my phone and the relay would click the number of steps. It would step those number the number of times to make connection to phone 3, phone 4, phone 5, etc. And all you need to do is put a series of these, a series of these for the first digit, a series for the second digit, a series for the third digit, and now you could call the person you wanted to call. And that was kind of the beginning of phasing out of your switchboard operators and having a mechanical, in this case, a mechanical switch doing the routing for you. Conceived as invention in 1880s, 1888, patented in 1891. 1891 gets patent for his phone switch, and actually starts putting that into use. Now, it did require a rotary dial phone. This would be maybe the first type that you would see that was a rotary dial. Because again, before that, I would pick it up and ring the switchboard operator. They'd make connection for me. Well, now as you pick up the receiver here, you dial the digit you want. Well, all it is as that rotary dial goes around, there's contacts inside. This is the inside. So if I dial the digit 5, when I let go, that wheel spins back, with some spring tension, and contacts inside make contact 5 times. Well, those 5 pulses then get picked up by this relay switch and click 5 times. Now I'm connecting to the digit 5, if you will. And then I put another bank of relays behind and I can do digit 7, 5, 7. And again, I do that maybe a third or fourth time and I can start dialing the person I want to connect to and basically bypassing your switchboard operator. But it did take the creation of this stepping switch and the rotary phone to put those two pieces together. But now you get a system where I have a phone line for my house and I can dial who I want. When I dial, the pulses go in here, the CO, the stepping relay clicks a couple notches, and I can make contact to this house over here. And it's just a little side story here. In 1927, there's actually a film put out to tell people how to use this phone. Because again, in those days, you were so used to calling the switchboard operator, you would need instruction on how to use that phone. That's a fun little video to see. So now, Bell, we're looking, early 1900s now. They start acquiring up little companies, and AT&T even tries to buy controlling interest in Western Union to basically buy up its competitor. This now has the attention of the ICC, which later becomes FCC, and says, hey, you really shouldn't be doing that. Get back in your lane kind of thing. So they forced AT&T to divest its holding in Western Union, and basically, hey, AT&T, you do your thing, and Western Union, you do your thing. Okay, that's kind of their dividing line right there. 1934, President Roosevelt created the FCC by signing the signing into law the Communications Act of 1934. This actually creates the FCC, and this also actually was a Communication Act to try to get phones to rural customers. That was also part of this as well. So start getting these phone lines out to rural customers. Long distance dialing to like another area didn't really become a reality till the 50s. If you called, it was all local calling, if you will. 1951, we start connecting towns together across distances. Now we can start calling town to town, and long distance calling is possible. But again, AT&T starts offering local and long distance calling, so they now again own about 90% of the market. So AT&T again is in the sights of the FCC of like, hey, you're owning a lot. You're owning a lot. I have a video here showing you the step-by-step switch you were dialing at that point in time. It actually shows the phone call going from relay to relay to relay to relay to dial the direct phone that you're trying to reach. Okay, when we come back, we'll continue on with our history.